Welcome to the new adventures of the Bakery Bears, a brand new series where we take you to fascinating UK destinations with amazing new stories.
A little over 200 years ago, Jane Austen published one of her most famous books, which told the fictional love story of Elizabeth Bennet and Mr. Darcy.
In 1995, the BBC aired their adaptation of a book which would feature one of the most iconic moments in British TV history.
That book was Pride and Prejudice, and one of its most iconic locations was Mr. Darcy's home, which we've come to explore today. Welcome to Lyme Park.
Forget that. Welcome to Pemberley. Yes, finally, we're here. It's the visit we've always been destined to make. How long is it since you've been here, Kay?
Probably about 1996.
Wow, that's a long time ago.
A long time.
So that's not long after the filming?
No.
I bet you were absolutely cock-a-hoop, were you?
I was a little excited.
Yeah. So it's 22 years ago that the location managers scoured the country looking for the perfect place for Pemberley, and they used the book because she described it very specifically within the book.
Yeah. So was there a real Mr. Darcy?
Well, that's exactly what we're here to find out. Our story starts in 1346 and the Battle of Crecy. This was the second of three decisive victories in the 100 Years' War between England and France. King Edward III of England led his army against a much larger French force, but he had with him a secret weapon. The longbow was like the sniper rifle of the Middle Ages. It enabled archers to attack knights at great distances. And at Crecy, the French did not know this was coming.
But as we join the battle, it's 4 p.m, and the huge French force is making their move here at Crecy Field. They have attacked the English army's flank and the standard of King Edward's son, the famous Black Prince, named so due to the colour of his armour. To you and I, the capture of a flag in a battle may seem consequential, but the French have taken Edward's standard, and in the Middle Ages this was disastrous. Armies who lost their standard had been known to capitulate, so getting it back was crucial. A charge was led and the standard was retrieved, and in that action the roots of Lyme Park lay. All the knights who fought to retrieve that standard were rewarded personally with land. The land here at Lyme passed into the hands of Margaret Ley, whose grandfather had been one of those brave knights at Crecy. Building back then took time, and it wasn't until 1465 that the first house was completed and recorded as being lived in.
But that house only stood for 100 years, and by 1550 the Leys of Lyme had grown hugely in importance, so they needed a house to reflect that, and they started work on this.
The house started out L-shaped in plan, with east and north ranges, and as the years passed, improvements were constantly made. But in the 1720s, the final works commence, which created the vista made so famous by Pride and Prejudice. An architect arrived from Venice who added stunning Palladian and Baroque features to the already breathtaking Elizabethan facade.
But what of Mr. Darcy? Is there a dashing young lead to sweep a maiden off her feet? And most importantly, did they live happily ever after?
To discover that, we're going to need to go to the year 1797, the year that Pride and Prejudice was set, to find out who was walking through these gardens. Just like in Jane Austen's book, the house was passing down a family line, but it wasn't the Darcys who owned Lyme, but the Leys. The same family who had built the house still lived here. Sadly, the present owner of the estate, Colonel Thomas Peter Ley, was a little bit of a vagabond. He'd never married, but he had fathered 7 different children to 7 different ladies. Now, to start to understand who he was and who his ladies were, we need to understand what they dressed in and why.
Clothing was made for each person individually. Usually made by yourself if you didn't have a lot of money, or if you were lucky, you would have a maid that would do all the sewing for you and help you dress and everything. Or you would go to a modiste or a tailor. At this time period, men really did go to tailors a lot. Men dressed with a lot of flair. There were famous dandies like Beau Brummel who made tailors like Weston famous. And, Weston would literally measure a man and cut a coat to fit him perfectly. So, he literally needed someone else to help him in and out of his coat. And, men would wear patterned waistcoats and tight pants and cravats. And a cravat was really a long piece of starched muslin that a man would tie and knot in his own individual style to show off his flair. Women got their ideas for what dresses and coats and clothing they wanted to have made based on fashion magazines like La Belle Assemblée and based on what other people were wearing. If you lived in the country, you were really out of it, and so you relied on your relatives to write you letters from London or Brighton and tell you what was fashionable. You were always kind of watching what other people were doing and imitating them. When you went to the dressmaker, she was expected to be an expert in what was fashionable. She would fit you, and then, you might have to do several dressings, to make sure that the fit was perfect. And so it was really a lot of work. Jane herself said, "I cannot determine what to do about my new gown. I wish such things were bought ready-made." In terms of fabrics in the Regency time period, fabric was very, very expensive. Muslin was by far the most popular fabric. I mean, there were silks, lightweight silks like sarsenets and silk velvets that were worn for fancy dress. But for everyday, sprig muslins and patterned muslins were the most popular. A lot of these muslin fabrics were made in India and hand painted. The Indian textile artists actually had books of designs that they knew that Westerners liked, floral patterns and scroll work. They would paint it on the fabric, and this made it very expensive. British merchants and textile industrialists were trying to find a way to make fabrics cheaper and faster, and they came up with the block printing process. This meant that a muslin would actually be stamped with the design in one color, and then you would stamp over it with the next color, you know, exactly in the same place, and you would keep going until the pattern was complete. So this meant you could have very elaborate patterns, and I actually have an example of a block printed muslin here from the time period. So, you know, the reason that patterns were so popular is that they hid the dirt and they hid wear, and, you know, people didn't have much clothing. So, you know, if you didn't have a lot of money, you would go for a sprig muslin or a patterned muslin. The other really popular fabric of the time period was a very loosely woven Indian muslin in white that was almost transparent. You know, it was so sheer that, of course, women wore undergarments beneath them, but it was still a little bit risque. So Jane Austen used to make fun of this, and she actually wrote to Cassandra once, describing a woman she saw at a dinner party. She said, "Mrs. Powlett was at once expensively and nakedly dressed." This was a real status symbol to wear white because it showed that if you stained your dress, you could afford to just buy another one. It also showed a kind of innocence that was very popular in an era where classicism was being revived. You know, Napoleon had created his empire and he was trying to be like a Roman emperor, and so these sort of toga-like white flowing garments were really, really popular.
But in that year of 1797, it was all change at Lyme Park because the vagabond Colonel Lay died. Now, he had no legitimate heir, so the house passed to his eldest male child. Now, this boy was the offspring born from a short affair with a maid from a local vicarage, and when he inherited, he was still living with his mum. Finally, ladies and gentlemen, we have found the real Mr. Darcy. I can't really imagine how it must have felt like to suddenly be thrust into the world of landed gentry. It sounds like the start of a novel, doesn't it?
Does anyone recognise where we are? I kind of had a heart attack. Do you know where Lizzie and her aunt and uncle have gone to dinner to Pemberley? And they're leaving and they come out of that entrance there, they get in their carriage and then they come round this circle and they go out of that gate there. Does anybody remember that? Oh, I did squee when I saw it. So who was our Mr. Darcy?
It's Thomas Lay.
Was he very young and dashing and handsome?
Well, he was most certainly young.
Right.
Because in 1797, when he inherited this house,
Yeah.
he was 5 years old.
Oh.
Now,
A bit too young then to be dashing and handsome.
Yeah. Many young boys would have seen this as an opportunity to go completely crazy, wouldn't they? And
Yeah.
possibly follow in father's footsteps and
Yeah.
go off the rails a bit by the time they're 18. But not our Thomas. Thomas, he decided to completely see through his education. And at 21, after doing everything that you would have expected a young boy to have done, he decided to set off out and see the world a little.
Thomas travelled to Egypt and was one of the first Europeans to explore the Nile Peninsula. And here he is, standing proud on the wall at Lyme Park. But he wasn't finished there. With his vast fortune, he continued his journeys exploring Greece, Petra, Jerusalem, Syria, and the Turkish Ottoman Empire. This was truly wild country in the early 1800s, and Thomas often found himself in scrapes similar to Indiana Jones. There's stories of treasure hunting and tales of wrestling crocodiles. After many years travelling, Thomas returned home with the resolution to be everything to Lyme that his father hadn't been. He would be a true English gentleman and lord of the manor.
In the 1800s, it was also really common for the lord of the manor to be the local MP, and that's exactly what Thomas did. He became Thomas Lay MP.
So we have found our Mr. Darcy, every bit as dashing and with a worldly charm rare in the Regency age. So where, I hear you ask, is our Lizzie? Well, I don't know about you, but I'm starving. So why don't you go pop on a cup of tea and we'll go find somewhere lovely for a picnic, and we'll see you in a minute.
So we found a spot for a picnic.
Yes,
Well, to be fair, there's a picnic table
there is.
and there's a nice lake.
Yeah.
And there's a few people, but it is a Saturday. There's not too many people. It's not It's not like Brimham Rocks.
No.
My brain is working today. I can actually remember where we've been in this series.
Oh, we couldn't remember, could we?
No, we couldn't.
No, it's not like Brimham Rocks, but it is very busy.
It is, but it's because it's Saturday.
Yeah, it's a Saturday.
We were going to come yesterday, but the weather, it's a typical English summer.
It is.
So we picked our spot and we came today. Neil, I mean, as far as we didn't really look, there is a restaurant, if you can call it that. It's a restaurant
There's
slash
like a little cafe thing down there, yeah.
Yeah. No, we didn't look at that. So,
No.
But I mean, National Trust is normally okay, isn't
Yeah,
it?
I'm sure it'd be fine for like a cup of tea and a scone or something.
Well, I think they do reasonable. There was people coming out with good
actual food.
good portions. They had good
Portion
portions.
size is important,
Yes,
is it?
yes.
Right.
Well, it looked quality as well. So, you know, I think whether you've come with a picnic, and now you just said it was busy. We got a picnic table.
We did manage.
And there's one spare there now.
Oh, so there is, yeah.
And there's also one spare there now.
Yeah.
So, you know, I think it's got to score relatively highly for picnicability.
I'd probably...
But the setting is not.
Yeah, I mean, I'd probably go with... I'll give it a 7. I was going to say 6, but I'll be generous and say 7.
Well, I say 6.
Oh, were you? Well, I was thinking 6.
Should we go with a 6 then?
Let's go 6.
Yes, I think we definitely
He read
should go
my
with a 6.
thoughts.
Our first score is a 6, and it's for picnicability. Now, we are, of course, here trying to discover if there was a real Mr. Darcy. But we've not really spoken very much about Jane Austen.
No.
Now, did you know she died, didn't she? She died in 1816. Yeah,
No,
1817.
It's just 200 years.
Yes.
It
of
was
course
the
it is.
200th anniversary of her death just a couple of weeks ago.
And she was only 41.
Yeah, and we think she died of lymphoma.
Hodgkin's
lymphoma is what they've kind of surmised from the symptoms that were sort of written down and things like that, wasn't it?
And it's really interesting, the story, I think, because she wrote tons and tons of letters, didn't she? That's sort of how she's most and well remembered.
People did back in the day, didn't they?
I wish they still did now, to be honest.
Yeah, so do I.
She wrote tons of letters, but after she died, her sister threw away 3/4 of the letters, and there were lots. And the reason why she did it,
shame, isn't it?
she did it because she didn't want people to read what she'd written about other members of the family.
Oh right, because she was quite catty, wasn't she,
Yeah,
Jane
she
Austen?
was.
I think
she
she
sounds
was.
like a total dude.
Yeah, I think she was quite catty. Quite, you know, she said what she thought, which is brilliant.
It is. And what I think is so sad is that she didn't see the fame which she's now got. And it was only a few years.
That happens a lot, doesn't it, with artists and authors? It happens an awful lot.
Yeah. It was 1833 actually when the fame really hit for her.
Gosh, so that's 100 years after then. Wow.
And it was, no, not 100 years, because she died in 1817.
Oh, sorry, I'm very confused. Oh, right, so 1727.
Yeah.
Oh, 15 years-ish.
And fame hit when a publisher put all her books together into a set.
Right.
And then it went on sale in 1833, and that's when things went absolutely crazy for her. And it's inspired so many people. Helen Fielding, for example, who wrote Bridget Jones, was completely inspired to write that story after reading Pride and Prejudice.
Really?
Yeah. And it's not, you know, I just picked that one. There was lots and lots of other ones as well.
It must have been. I mean, it is very. When you read Pride and Prejudice, I think it still feels kind of modern because of the way that she spoke about people, and I've reread it recently actually, so it's sort of fresh in my mind. But it doesn't feel 200 years old.
No, not at all. We saw a news report actually with regards to her. There was been things going on, isn't there? Because she's going to go on the £10 note.
She is.
That's just so cool.
Yeah, in September I think it comes out, doesn't it? A new £10 note, and Jane Austen's going to be on it, which I think is fantastic.
No, but I certainly will. I'll be looking out for Jane on.
You never have any money. That's probably why.
No, Kay deals with
You never
that.
have cash. We were coming in today, and like the car park sign came up, and he's like, "Have we got money?" I was excited driving in, wasn't I?
Yes. Oh, yes. She was really, really excited. It was great. It was great.
I went, oh! I can see the entrance.
It's the most
where
exciting.
Lizzie pulled up in the carriage. I was
It's the most
like this.
excited I've ever seen Kay, actually, ever, I think, ever.
So was there actually a real Lizzie Bennet living at Lyme Park?
Well, it's funny you should ask that, because there most certainly was. And her name was Ellen.
Ellen.
Thomas Leigh's neighbour was William Turner, and he lived here at Shrigley Hall. Not only were they neighbours, but they were also colleagues, as both men served as members of Parliament. They'd struck up a firm friendship even though William was some 17 years older than Thomas. But in 1826, disaster struck the Turner family. Their only daughter, and so heiress to the family estate, was kidnapped.
The villain of this piece was Edward Wakefield. He was 30 when Ellen was 15, but Edward had political aspirations, and to do that, he needed money.
He had already married once for an inheritance, and he was about to do it again. He sent his servant to Ellen's boarding school, who told the headmistress that her mother had become seriously ill and she needed to see her daughter immediately. Ellen was taken to Edward Wakefield, who told her her father's business had collapsed and he was on the run from creditors. He said her father's banks had agreed to transfer his estate to her, or more specifically, to her new husband. He graciously offered to be that husband. Ellen could do nothing other than to agree, and so they eloped to Gretna Green and were married.
Wakefield wrote to Ellen's father and told her that they were married. He knew if he could keep Ellen away from her family, that soon they would have to accept it.
But William Turner was a devoted father. He went to the British Foreign Secretary for help. Wakefield now knew he had to get out of the country fast. He and his new wife headed to France, away from the reaches of English law. With the help of the Foreign Secretary, they were intercepted at Calais. Edward Wakefield was arrested and sent to Newgate Prison. Ellen was escorted home by her uncle and her father's close friend, our Mr. Darcy, Thomas Leigh. This was love at first sight, one of those lightning bolt moments, but Thomas, ever the English gentleman, told Ellen they must wait until she was an adult before they were married. 2 years passed and their love had grown more every day. So in 1828, William Turner gave his blessing and Ellen and Thomas were married.
So we have our Lizzie and Mr. Darcy.
We most certainly do. And the wonderful thing about Thomas and Ellen is Thomas was prone to grand romantic gestures. He even bought Ellen an Erard harp, which we've actually seen today in the library.
Yeah. Did she play?
She most certainly did. It was absolutely acceptable for ladies to be musicians in that period.
Wow, and what else would she have spent her time doing?
Let's find out.
Handwork in Jane Austen's time period was something that was considered an important female accomplishment. It was really mandatory for a girl to learn how to do needlework. And needlepoint was displayed in samplers where you kind of showed off all of your different stitches. Even if you were terrible at embroidery and needlework, you had to sort of pretend that you weren't. So, for example, in Mansfield Park by Jane Austen, the privileged Lady Bertram, who's very idle and lazy, and spends most of her time sleeping on a sofa, gets her poor relation Fanny to do her embroidery work for her. But, it was actually very popular to do white work, where you would take your white muslin and you would embroider on it with white dots on a white background, white checks on a white background, more elaborate lace and flower motifs in white thread were very popular. And you could also create eyelets with this technique to do lace panels. So even though, you didn't necessarily make your own dress, like, Jane Austen didn't have a lot of money. She was the daughter of a clergyman, but she could still afford a dressmaker. But then she would kind of make her gowns more beautiful by embroidering them or trimming them with ribbon. And this was very common, especially if you had a white gown, to kind of make it stand out from all the other white gowns, you would embroider it. So I actually have an example of this, just so you can see what the Indian muslin looked like. And this is from about 1810, and you can see there's some beautiful embroidery work on that. So in the Regency time period, in all the research I've done about fashion and lifestyles of women of the period, I really haven't come across much information about crocheting or knitting as a refinement. Obviously in the United Kingdom, people were knitting to earn money. There are mentions of Irish crochet starting at about 1820 at the very end of the Regency period. But again, it really wasn't something that you would cultivate as a handcraft that showed off your what a cultivated woman you were. Instead, you might make lace by tatting, which was using a shuttle, and it was a kind of knotting technique, or you might net things, which was creating large loops using 2 sticks and kind of a netting needle. Jane Austen would net reticules for herself. That was a kind of purse. Women's clothing didn't have any pockets, so they really needed a reticule, and you would make that as ornamental as possible. So I actually have an example of netting. This is over a dress, but it just gives you a sense of what that technique looked like. And then tambour work was also extremely popular. And this is because of those loose woven Indian muslins. They were kind of a perfect background for embellishments. And so women would stretch the muslin tight over a frame and then put it on a stand. And using a small crochet hook, they would punch through the fabric to set even chains. And you could create beautiful little chain stitches much more easily than in embroidery. So that was a very, very popular handcraft as well.
In 1830, Lyme Park heard the patter of tiny feet as Thomas and Ellen were blessed with the birth of their first child. Yes, our Lizzie and Mr. Darcy had a little girl. Thomas, ever the grand romantic, insisted on calling the little girl Ellen after his true love. Now why don't you and I take a stroll through Thomas and Ellen's house? Look at this. It's one of the first rooms that you get to as you walk into the house, and it is just beautiful. There's tapestries there hung up on the wall, but it's surprisingly homely. As you make your way out of that room, you come to this lobby, if you like, but to the right there's a beautiful corridor, but throughout all the house, and this is very typical of stately homes within this country, they're full of the most beautiful artwork, normally connected to the house in some way, whether it be owners or relatives, but sometimes it was just famous people of the day. This is the library, and it's just wonderful, isn't it, to be walking in the footsteps of Thomas and of Ellen. As the ceiling in the library was just absolutely stunning. It's wood, as you can see, beautiful carved wood, and a really gorgeous chandelier there as well. But this is the room that really took our breath away. Surprisingly small though, and manageable. The type of thing that you'd walk into and think, yeah, I could cope with this, no problem at all. But this really, for me, was the crowning jewel in everything that we saw. It's the Erard harp that Thomas bought Ellen on their first wedding anniversary. Just stunning. Here's a bedroom. And there was quite a few bedrooms that we went through, but this was the most picturesque, and it was the brightest as well. And as you make your way up the staircase, you are greeted with the most enormous painting of Colonel Lay, the vagabond. Of course, this was Thomas's father, and here he is, the man himself, finishing our tour, Thomas Lay, as he explored Egypt. Now, I don't know about you, after all that talk of handcrafts, I think it's time that we try to find the perfect spot to have a little knit. And I think I spied a seat, and that'd be a first in this series.
Well, we made it.
We made it.
This is pretty grand.
Very grand.
Because we have a seat. That does assuage. It does assuage the amount of small children.
Yes. What does assuage mean?
I don't know, it just sounded posh.
Right.
You see, you put me in a Regency period and I start using words like assuage.
I know, and you could have even got dressed up, couldn't you? This is so cool, right? There's a dressing up room in the house, costume room, I'll say. And you can get dressed in period, is it Regency period? Yeah, like Lizzie and Mr. Darcy, and just walk around the house for the rest of the day, dressed like that. We've seen so many people, and you might spot a few, in the shots. You can get dressed up if you want and stay in it all day. Brilliant.
Look, I'm sorry.
We need the parasol.
I'm going to have to put my parasol up.
Yes.
Oh, do you know that works?
It does work. I think it does work.
Oh, I want one.
I want one. Let me try
one.
it. Let me try it.
Now.
It kind of does work.
Now, we are sat with the house just over to our left.
Yep.
The moment with it's been voted one of the most iconic moments in British TV history. That moment
when you walked around the corner.
Yes. Yes. That's where we
Amazing.
started
That was just
today's
there.
show.
It was just, I'm looking at it right now, where Mr. Darcy walked around the corner when he was all dripping wet.
And there is the lake, of course, where he swam. But I think we should have a little bit of a knit.
Yes.
It's funny that you're knitting your Jaws sock.
I know.
There is a Lego crocodile over there.
Yeah, there's some Lego in the house today as well. There's this thing where...
They're celebrating the life of the man that we've been learning about today,
Yeah.
Thomas Lay, our very own Mr. Darcy.
And you can follow a trail of Lego through all the rooms, and it's all the kind of things that he would have come across.
Now, as far as knitting spots go, if you were to remove all the people...
Yes, it would be
This is
fabulous.
pretty iconic.
It is, it's lovely.
I mean, it is pretty iconic.
And I was just saying, can you imagine having your wedding here and all the guests out on the lawn, and they've got like old-fashioned toys, you know, like croquet and kites.
So
Fabulous.
If we're going to score it for knittability...
Can we get married again?
Yes.
Yes.
And now I know what we could do. I could like jump in, couldn't I? Yeah.
We could totally do that,
That'd
couldn't
be
we?
amazing.
We could have a Pride and Prejudice themed wedding number 2.
If we're going to score it, it's surely going to score fairly highly.
Yes, I think so.
What do you think? I mean, maybe one off because the
Yeah.
amount of people.
Yeah, there's quite a lot of people.
Because that's the only thing that sort of spoils the ambiance. So what do you think for a scoring?
8.
Right. I was going to go...
Were you going to go 9?
See, it's tricky.
Well, we could go 8.5.
It's pretty cool because I'm sat on a seat knitting.
I know, well,
And
that
it's
is
very rare I
very
get
good,
the opportunity
actually.
to sit on a seat that sinks when you sit on it.
Yeah, yeah.
So 8.5.
8.5.
Cool. So we got 6 and we got 8.5. Interestability.
Interestability. Well, I think actually we were saying when we were walking around the inside of the house, which, as I think I said before, it wasn't used in Pride and Prejudice, which is a shame actually, thinking about it.
Yeah, it wasn't used.
It wasn't used.
All it says is that there was an issue between the filming crew and the management of...
Right, of the house,
Yeah.
right. But it's actually a much more friendly and warm place than Chatsworth.
Very much so.
It's on a smaller scale, isn't it?
Yes.
And it just feels more of a home.
Yes.
More lived in.
Yes.
And you obviously can't touch stuff, but it's not as cordoned off
No.
as Chatsworth is. You can actually walk into the rooms, which you can't at Chatsworth.
I think what's nice is it's not blingy.
No, it's not blingy. It doesn't
it's
feel
like a
blingy.
house that you or I might live in.
Yeah.
What do we think for interestability?
I think it's quite high, actually. I mean, I'd go with an 8 again, I think.
I'd agree with you.
Ah,
So we have an 8. So we had 6 for picnicability.
yep,
We had 8.5 for our knitability.
yep.
And we had 8 for our interestability, giving us the grand total of 22.5.
Not bad.
And I think we should just stick the leaderboard up over there.
Yeah.
And there
I'm
it is.
looking. Look at me looking.
No, do.
I
do.
was looking at the
Yes, well, it's
leaderboard.
there. Everyone can see it. It slots in quite nicely. It's never going to be one of our favourite places to knit because it's just too far.
It is. It is a bit too far for us.
We
really.
did this especially for Longbourn and for you. But do you know what? I'm so glad that we've come here.
Yes.
It's been...
It's been good, actually. Yeah, it has, and it's so lovely to. Because I mean, to me, Lyme Park is Pemberley, and I can just see Lizzie and Darcy
Yeah.
on that corner there. Oh, butterfly!
Loads of wildlife and
beautiful
it's
butterfly.
just beautiful. It's a big estate actually, similar to Chatsworth.
It's very big estate. Yeah.
If you have the opportunity to come here, I would strongly suggest you come here.
Yes, you could easily fill a day.
I would suggest
without a problem.
that. I mean, it's funny because do you know what? I think I'd tell people to come here before Chatsworth.
I probably would as well. It's just a bit more accessible. Is that the right word? No.
Accessible, friendly, and
Yeah.
this place feels a lot more iconic.
It does. It does actually.
Because of that view that you're looking at right
because
now.
Of that view, and also where you walk in, where you come in on the entrance. That's really iconic with the film as well.
Yeah.
With the series, it wasn't really a film, was it?
And what I love the most about this is, you know, and we say this so often in this series, when you actually just scratch the surface of history, you find stories like Thomas and Ellen's just as interesting as any book that you would ever read. So definitely, if you can, come and visit Lyme Park.
Yes.
And so ends our 4th new adventure.
We came in search of Mr. Darcy, but I think we found something so much better. Thomas and Ellen with a story fit for any Jane Austen novel.
What I love the most about this story is where it started, with untold bravery on a battlefield which resulted in the gift of this land. Without that, there might never have been a Thomas and Ellen.
And who knows how successful Colin Firth's career would have been without that shot. We'll see you next time for more new adventures.
Bryony gets to watch a live
2.
podcast. Or watch that drink. Watch that drink.
Keep enjoying the sandwich style. So, I'll just set it going. And could you do the lovely claps for me, gorgeous girl?
1. Shall I do that again?
Yes, please.
1, 2.
Lovely job. And I need to
Watch the poop. I think it must be deer poop.
Oh,
Well, what else could it
maybe I
be?
should stand in it then, as a celebration.
What other poop could it be? It must be deers. It's too
Rabbit.
big to... Can't be rabbits. Have you seen the size of it?
Right.
It must be like ninja rabbits. Mutant.
Elephants.
Doubt it's elephants.
This is the link.
They're doing something about him on the Lego thing.
Yeah,
I
that's
read
right.
it.
Yeah, she
Well,
read it
just
on the
go
back
up
of the
here.
toilet.
I was reading it.
And actually, what we do,
Oh,
that is a clear route where there is no poo.
okay.
So after I've said the first thing, you're going to say,
But what about Lizzie? Tell me there's a Lizzie.
oh, it's like you've been on the stage. And then I'll say something else, and you say,
I don't know what you said.
no, tell me now.
Right, okay.
You see, I'm not going to remember that. In the 1800s, it was also pretty common for the Lord of the Manor to be...
Frog! Frog!
Oh my goodness. Frog alert.
Can I come and see?
It's a frog!
Yeah, come on. We'll do that bit again in a second.
There.
You look like you're smiling at me.
Oh, sorry, no, I wasn't.
No.
I was just squinting.
I thought you were laughing at me.
No, is that it?
Yeah. Right. No, in fact, what I'll do is I'll come a little bit closer. We'll do more of a close-up. Just sit this back up. So you say, so who was our Mr. Darcy? And I say, it's Thomas Leigh. And you say, was he handsome and dashing? And they started work on this. Cool.
Stop.
Yeah, Beat's filming, and he comes stand next to me. You just need to respond.
Okay.
Right, the camera is rolling, okay? Camera is rolling. And it wants to be nice and steady up on me. Am I out of the shot?
Yes.
And now am I in the shot?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So nice and steady. This is such an important shot. So you're going to hold it dead straight. I'm going to walk towards it, say something, then I'm going to walk on, and you're going to follow me
After
round.
when you've said it, do I pan around?
Yes. Yeah. So as I walk on, pan around slowly. You don't need to necessarily follow me, and then up to the house.
Okay.
But about that sort of speed, yeah. So yeah. That's good. Cool. Okay.